And we're live with our Friday live stream. We've never started on the 0 mark. I never quite know how to turn it on at the exact right moment.
I think you've always started on the 0 mark. You kind of sit at 0 for
Oh
a
yeah,
while,
yeah,
technically. Yeah.
exactly. It sits on 0 for quite a bit before we actually start talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm learning. How are you doing, Cole?
I'm doing good. And I hope everyone else is doing good. Some interesting, heavy news this week to talk about. So, I want to talk about how amazing my week has been. rub it in everyone's faces.
Well, let's introduce
How have you
ourselves
been?
first. I mean, we should introduce ourselves. My name's Amid. I'm the
Yeah.
publisher of Cartoon Brew, and you are.
I'm Cole Delaney. I'm the host of In Between, which is interviews. I actually never know how to categorize that, but it's a partner festival for Cartoon Brew, and I'm also the host of my own podcast, Animator's Breakfast.
And you are based in Dublin.
I'm in Ireland right now, yeah, in beautiful sunny Ireland, which it actually is. It is. It's having a good time, and you're in LA,
Yep.
so we've got a nice spread around the world here.
So today, topics for today. Let's mention what they are. We got a lot of stuff to go over, but the first thing we want to talk about was the Pixar layoffs. These happened last week, but they still haven't been discussed as much as they should be. And we have AI in animation production. This is a big story and it's actually a very Irish story because Brown Bag Films in Ireland has released their AI guidelines. One of the first studios that has done that. Does Disney need a course correction? This is what John Musker said. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're also going to chat a little bit about Annecy, which is coming up in just over a week. Is anybody here on the chat? Let's see if anybody wants to mention anything on the chat. We're reading them throughout the episode and happy to engage and hear what your thoughts are as well.
Yeah, especially when it comes to, I know things like the layoffs and obviously AI are very controversial subjects and everyone has their own opinions. So, rather than just me and Amid's opinions, thoughts, it's always good to get more people in the mix. So please feel free, fire in the comments. We'll be engaging with them throughout.
And something we've noticed too is that a lot of times the chat, not the chat, but I'm sorry, but the comments on the video views like pick up after it's published. So there's a lot of people who are not watching this live. So feel free to comment in the YouTube comments afterwards as well if you want to continue the discussion. There's a big audience that is watching these afterwards, and I assume that's because a lot of people are working right now. But you should take a break and watch it live too.
Yeah, or just throw it on while you're sending emails or animating or whatever you're doing at the moment. If what else happens, meetings, what's kind of in between those two things? I don't know. So, Amit, Pixar undertakes biggest layoffs in history.
Yeah, let's bring
Hundreds
up
to be
screen.
let go.
Here we go.
Hundreds to be let go. The studio will lay off about 14% of its 1,300 person workforce. Wow.
Yeah, so that's the big story.
Huge.
So this was announced in January. The news was revealed. They didn't really announce it, but the story was broken. I forget by who. I think The Verge or something. And at the time, The Verge, I believe it was The Verge, they reported there's going to be layoffs of up to 20%. And, I went out to Pixar as soon as that happened. I went up to them and I said, "Hey, is this accurate?" And they were like, "No, it's absolutely not accurate. We can tell you that there's going to be layoffs, but we don't know how many, but it's definitely not going to be 20%. And so in that sense, there were not 20%, but 14% is still a significant part of the studio. That works out, as we write in this article, to around 100 75 people. And
Mm.
uh, the reason that Jim Morris gave, I think the most important thing we can do here is read what the Pixar president said to the
Mhm.
employees about why they did these layoffs. Right? He said, "Hello, everyone. I've spoken to you many times over the last year about our pending move away from series production for Disney Plus and the return to our focus on feature films and the reduction in our team that would accompany that." So it's a pretty clear reason. You know, they invested a lot in streaming for the Disney
Mm.
Plus launch, and Pixar was
Yeah.
going to start making series. And now they're saying we're pulling back from that. So that's kind of the official reason of why they're doing the
Yeah.
layoffs. Now, with that expectation, I was expecting there was going to be a lot of contract workers let go, which they were. They were among the first to go. But what I don't think I expected was that they were going to be laying off a lot of their key veterans at the studio,
Yeah.
because that doesn't align
Yeah.
with the fact that we're going back to making features. Why are you laying off the core veterans that made your features? Right?
Mm.
These cuts were incredibly. Uh, I would say they were incredibly harsh cuts across the different departments that they had. One animator, she wrote that, you know, the cuts in the animation department were cutting out a lot of people who had built the current department, who were
Yeah.
pillars of that current department. So it wasn't just like younger artists, but they were cutting core crew. One artist, story artist who was cut there, has been there for over 30 years. He's been there almost the entire length of the history of the studio. And these kind of people, like, they're iconic. You don't want to, sometimes they're the core, they're the heart of the studio. And even if
Yeah.
maybe they're not contributing at the capacity that they were earlier, they're still people that you
Mm.
want to have around as mentors, as people that encourage the younger artists. But these cuts are devastating. I don't know what's going on. I don't think anyone's quite clear on what's happening. I know a lot of the Pixar artists. You know, they have, they're trying to figure out on Discord, on their own private Discords, what's going on, and talking to each other. But it's not quite clear. And I think the story will come out in a while about what is
Yeah.
happening.
Well, I'm curious about the cutting back on the series, right? How many series did they actually release?
Yeah,
I know there's
yeah.
Win or Lose, which hasn't been released yet. Um, there was Monsters at Work, I think, is another one. I'm trying to think
So Monsters at
what
Work
others.
wasn't even made at Pixar. That's made at
Yeah,
service studios outside. It might have been some in-house development at Pixar, but I don't. But the in-house development would not have required a huge, new crew, because there was no production happening in-house. There was the Ask Forky, I think. That was an
oh yeah, Forky
early
asked the
show,
question.
but that may have
Yeah,
even been in the plans like very early on. I don't know that they would have needed a huge. It, it's questionable. I wonder if they had other shows that were in development that they
yeah,
were planning to
interesting.
make. I don't know,
Mm.
but yeah. So
Yeah, it's I honestly don't know. It doesn't really make much reasoning sense for me. But I can never any kind of corporate release in terms of reasons why you're letting people go. It always just seems a bit fluffy, I think is the term, right? It never really truly gets to the heart of it. Here we go. Sorry, comments. Monsters at Work was done by Icon Creative, wasn't it? That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know, but I could look it up real quick. But again, that's not an internal thing. So if that's the core reason that they're shifting back toward features, it doesn't make sense. And like you said, it was very rough because I'm reading all week um, statements from people who have been let go, and how emotionally devastated they are. And of course, they're trying to pick up the pieces along the way. They're saying, "Hey, I am one of the people who was let go as part of uh, the cull. I don't know how else to term something like this. The firings, but it's like so emotionally loaded because, like you said, there's so many people who were core pillars of specific departments that won't be there anymore. That's talent that you really do lose. And I know that it's a thing of you want to get new people in with new ideas, of course, but at the same time, people dedicate so much time and work and effort and years and so much to something like this to be kind of released with an email or a memo. It's pretty devastating, right?
Yeah, we have a comment from James. He says, I'm sure y'all have read this, but this blog from one of the layoff victims is good. There's no link, and I'm not sure where the blog is, but I would love to read it. If James, if you could send us comment on what that link is, that would be fantastic. And then Destroy says Monsters at Work was done by Icon Creative, and then Studio Arbit says, yeah, Monsters at Work was created by Disney TV with the animation done by Icon. Pixar only had a few people consult on season 1. Okay.
The prior comment, I don't see a prior comment.
Yeah,
sorry, James.
yeah. It might be cutting links out because there is no link there. So I mean, one thing to discuss if you're trying to understand the Pixar layoffs, because I think a lot of people aren't necessarily connecting the dots, and the dots are showing up pretty clear. Prior to sometime last year, there were 3 studios that were doing animated features in the U.S., still animating features entirely in the U.S. 3 remain. Blue Sky had shut down, of course. So there was DreamWorks, Disney, and Pixar. And all 3 of them have been going through some stuff. And you can see the shift that's happening as feature CG animation moves out of the U.S. If you remember this story that we ran, DreamWorks has already said we're shifting production away from in-house. Doesn't mean they're not going to animate certain features in-house, but they're also looking to animate a lot more features outside, and to have all of their features have some contributions from vendor studios outside of the U.S. Though they may, I believe they still have potentially, some films coming up that may be animated entirely in-house. Wouldn't be surprised if like Shrek was one of those films, but almost certainly they're looking for the future to send their films outside, and they're cutting back. They've had layoffs. Then this week we got the trailer for Moana 2. And this film, as we all know by now, actually I'm surprised by how many people don't know this, who do, but people who read Cartoon Brew should know this, is that this film was originally a series that was being made at Disney Animation in Vancouver. And last fall, internally, they decided we're going to turn this series into a feature. But now a lot of the work is being done in Vancouver, which was never initially, when they set up that studio, they kind of told artists, they gave them the assurance that this studio is going to be for our streaming work. It's not going to be for feature work. And so literally the first project that they're putting out is a feature. And that to me is like a real betrayal of what you told your artists that the purpose of the Vancouver studio was for. So Disney's being a lot more sneaky about it than DreamWorks. DreamWorks was like, they told their artists, hey, we're shifting production. Disney is like, we're shifting production, but we're not even gonna, we're gonna do it in a way where we kind of pretend like we're doing something else first, and then we do it. And then now Pixar, their whole thing is they're not shifting production; they're just chopping off all their veterans,
cutting,
right? Bringing in an entirely new, which is another way of like, you don't have to shift production overseas, but if you cut out all your veterans who are making the most money, who've been there 15 plus years, and bring in younger people, that's kind of the equivalent of saving money, right? So all 3 of them are doing the same thing. You're seeing feature animation kind of slip away from the U.S. in terms of production, but they're all doing it in a different way. And so each of them is going to be viewed differently. But if you work in the business, you should be viewing this all the same. All 3 things that are happening here are exactly the same thing, except they're not being done in the exact same method. That's my take on it. I don't know if it's an accurate take, but that's how I see it.
But it is true. Like
I'm not running any of the studios. When I say I don't know, I'm not inside the studio, right? So I don't know what the management is thinking. So that's why I say I don't know if it's an accurate take, but you can kind of connect the dots and see what's going on.
Yeah. It does seem to be something like that. Or, I think the last live stream we were talking about, what was that video essay um, about the animation industry at the moment, and one of the reasons for that they speculate the layoffs are happening is because they hired so many people with the streaming boom, and what was one of the things Pixar said that they were going to do with streaming, like in Disney Plus, which was make these TV series. So in that sense, if you were to look at it that way and take the word as face value, oh, they're looking at TV series. Oh, okay, but now they're not making TV series, so they're letting go of some of the people, because they're not focused on that anymore. But then you start to read some of the names of the people that are let go, and you're just kind of like, oh, okay, interesting, yeah. One of the comments here says, crazy that Jeff Pigeon was laid off. He was a staple of the studio. Yeah.
He was the one,
Oscar.
33-year veteran of the studio.
Yeah.
I mean, then you had people in the story department, multiple people in the story department and the animation department who were there for 15 to 20 years. I'm not going to go through a list of, people that I know were laid off on this live stream.
Yes. Yeah.
but
Yeah, of course.
but there were a lot of 15 to 20-year veterans in the story and the animation department, some of your core departments who were let go. There were production managers there who have been there for a very long time. Production manager, like, not even like, it's not something that's like an animator where like no one else can do it, but you want that knowledge in the studio. That's not even something that, like, why would you let someone go unless you're really cutting back on something?
Yeah. Knowledge, right? And a key thing as well for is the personability, right? Being able to kind of deal with people, and if you're in production, the best talent that you have is helping people out, people management, people skills. And how do you do that is by knowing people, so you start chopping and changing in there. It's going to be a whole lot rockier really going forward, because suddenly you've got all these people coming in that, and by no fault of their own, if there are people coming in, or the ones left over, may not know as many people as had been there before. And if they do tend to hire new talent in after this, the people who are still in the company, how bad does that feel as well? Oh, okay, I wasn't laid off this time. If is this going to happen again? You're saying goodbye to your friends. I'd say the morale is probably pretty low in Pixar at the moment, for everyone who's leaving, but also everyone who's left. And if this is a reason to balance the bucks, you should never really cut people to meet an arbitrary number, an arbitrary projection. If the studio is really struggling, that's fair enough. You can kind of release a statement to say that, but in that statement there at all, it doesn't really say that. It's just like, oh, we're parting with a number of talented and dedicated colleagues and friends. That doesn't really mean anything. It's just like,
no, and
sorry to see you go.
And the people that work in a studio, when we say a studio culture, the people that work there are the culture, right? And if you cut the core 100%. Of that culture, you basically you lose everything that you have. But I mean, look, if this was done with, like, if they were integrating, because certainly there has been some stagnancy at the studio, and I think Turning Red was a kind of a really good step forward for them. Putting Domi Shi in a creative management position was really good. There's a lot of interesting projects that are coming up on the short side, done by people who are not just like the just men. Like they have interesting things coming up, right?
Yeah. They do, and the Spark Short program is a great thing, to develop talent like that.
It is, and so if this was done with, like, we're bringing, but this really was. I don't think the intent of these layoffs was like we're bringing in a new generation. I think there's something else going on. But if that were the intent, there would have been a better way to integrate the new talent with the older talent. Here it's just kind of like we're just starting from scratch. And I don't quite understand where it's going to go. But we'll find out.
Yeah,
We'll find out.
we will find out. I'm curious, does anybody else have more comments or suggestions or thoughts about the Pixar layoffs while you're in there, guys? Because this is obviously something that's still at the heart of a lot of people. Like you said, the trends are there, and Pixar seems to be one of the last studios to really start to announce this stuff. And even though they're all happening at the same time, but it's now June, right? So tough, very tough. Whereas places like Ireland, we're having a great time,
Speaking
just
of
announcing. Speaking of Ireland,
speaking of Ireland, no, our
AI,
next story,
baby.
our next story. You guys are the leaders in AI now, aren't you?
They got ahead, right?
You're
They
you're
calling the
you're
game.
you're the leaders in making guidelines for AI.
Well, you know what I really like about that is it's true. It's a great thing to kind of step ahead and say, hey, let's, everyone has different opinions on AI and how to use it. I know Carl had said that. But let's just show our hand and show what we're talking about rather than being kind of some backward shadow space. AI is kind of like, oh, it's over there. We're not quite sure what to do with it. Make the guidelines, make the guidelines. And
How do you
just
say his
before
name?
Cahill Gaffney.
Capo?
Cahill, yeah, you wouldn't say the
Cahill.
T.
Okay, so you don't say the
Cahill.
T in there.
No, Cahill Gaffney, yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Um,
I was confused by
so,
that.
there you go, world. And
Do you
before
want
we
to?
do
Do you want
go
to
move on,
before we talk about the story though? Let's tell people what the story
yeah,
is because it just went up yesterday. Do you want to go through it or?
yeah. I was just going to say there is a comment popped in there from Roblox Robot. This is a new era of Pixar with last their birds. Stanton, Catmull, Jobs, Unkrick, Pigeon, all gone. Doctor's the only remaining from the original era. Yeah,
I
I
thought
guess
Stanton was still there.
is he not a consultant, a story consultant, Andrew
That's not
Stanton?
what I heard. I can't say what I heard, but
Well, you know better than me.
but unless
Yeah.
something's happened, things happen quick. But last I heard, he was still there.
Mm. Um, yeah, the era listen looking bright. I'm glad that Doctor realizes that they need to make more broad stories and not personal ones. So hopefully they can inch closer to the original Pixar vision.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
agree with that one at all.
yeah.
All
Also, I don't
stories are
either.
personal. All
Sorry.
stories are personal,
Yeah.
right?
Sorry, Robot. I love that you're commenting. I really do. But I also think
But no,
that
but do you agree
the
with
best of
that?
those Pixar stories, yeah, is personal, deeply personal stories. The Incredibles is a very personal story. There's nothing broad about that at all. It's a story of a family.
Toy Story is a
Um,
personal story, but it's a story
Very
of
true.
a person who this is what was of interest to them. It's pure
Yes.
nostalgia.
Mm, yeah, Wally, very personal. Um, anyway, sorry. Brown Bag and Nine Story launch guidelines for AI use in their productions. So exciting. Again, I'm always repping Ireland, so let's keep this going. I'm glad we're getting ahead of AI. But Brown Bag are huge, right? They're a huge studio that work primarily in CG in terms of service. Now they do develop talent in there as well, but they tend to get commissioned IP production. Things like a big one for a long time was Doc McStuffins, things like that. Were kind of huge for them. Vampirina, Disney Junior shows. Um, and they address this straight away. We do a lot of service work. So copyright is a huge part of what they're doing, and AI at the moment doesn't really fall in any copyright guidelines. It doesn't, especially in how models are trained. They tend to skim a lot of copyrighted material. So, um, I've seen it in productions myself, Amid, where producers or um, directors will use AI to generate, like using something like Midjourney, the kind of generative AI imagery of what they want, and then try and push that into the production. They just try and push it in. Even though I'm a designer, other people are designers. We can take that as a first step and work with it. Then, like using any reference is reference, but they tend to kind of push that through. So how you're using these copyrighted materials, I think is really, really important. And I think that's one of the core thoughts about AI and why you need kind of guidelines is because, first of all, you're circumventing human input. And second of all, you're actually not, because you're using other humans' input illegally, if that makes sense.
But let me ask this. So this is the gray line though, and it kind of speaks to what you're saying. Let's say a
Mm,
director generates concept art with AI and then says to you, "Hey, replicate that." So what you're putting in the film is you. You're not actually doing that,
hmm
but you're still using, something that created from, there's nothing ethically, I think, wrong in that if all the creation is original by you. But
hmm
nevertheless, the concept could be coming from materials that are stolen.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, because I don't even think that's a gray line. That's just the line, and that's what reference is, right? I don't know any artist in the world that can create something totally brand new from their head. It's always going to be a Frankenstein of influences.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this crazy mash of, oh, we like the color of this, but we like these shapes, and we like how this moves, and it's being able to take all those. I've talked to Tom Moore about this. We've talked at length about AI, and there's something in your head that kind of works a bit like stable diffusion. All your kind of references, everything like that. But really, if you're using the same references over and over and over again, you're never going to grow. Like, you're kind of stuck within your limitations, and that then defines your style. Which AI can be stuck within its own limitations based on what the model is trained on. So, and they're getting better and better in terms of replicating the human hand, but so far they're not very good at being able to, change things on the fly, to say that tree over there needs to be totally different. Now, of course, it's going to get better and it's going to get good. So, in terms of their guidelines, one thing that they're talking about is exactly that, the kind of ethical use and transparency of AI implementation, right? And how it pulls uh, the intellectual property of other artists, and how they're actually going to use that. And one thing that I really, really like is the kind of clarity in terms of, if AI is used in this at all, then what's the transparency in the implementation of that? To say, hey, has this been used, and should we kind of put a stamp to say it has been used in this? I saw a movie recently, and in the credits, as a thank you, they always have like Getty's images. They thanked Midjourney,
Oh
so it
wow,
was like,
interesting.
okay, wow, so they've used AI in this movie. I couldn't believe it. I
That's
was
a
like,
good
oh,
sign that
that's
we've used AI, as if you're thanking the AI company in your
yeah,
credits.
exactly right. But I wonder then, did they like, because they'd only put that in there if they legally had to do it. Otherwise, the credit wouldn't be there. So there's all this kind of idea of governance and what AI means, and I'm curious what everyone else thinks. I know overwhelmingly most artists are like, hand no to AI, absolutely not. And you can even see it in the logo that the guys have there, which is all these hands and made by humans in print, right?
That's
So,
something funny. Typically, I mean, something that companies do is, especially big corporations, is that
mm,
the branding that they put out is usually the opposite of what they're actually doing. So you'll have like all these oil companies put out like, we're environmentally friendly, right? Like they do the because they want to be perceived as that, right? Or
yeah,
fashion companies will put out logos of like, or branding campaigns for like ethically sourced, or like, so made by
yes, yeah,
humans. I'm not sure. I mean, they're trying to send a message here that, but that we respect artists, and I appreciate that. But then the
mm.
fact that they're making it such a big part of when you're releasing your AI guidelines, I thought that was the only part of this. Look, I give Brown Bag a ton of credit. I think
yeah,
what they did is amazing here, because no other studio has done this. I cushioned it. I
mm,
said they might be the first, might be the very first, or one of the first. I do think they're the first major studio that has publicly released their guidelines, because every other studio is doing this right now too. Every other major studio, they got R&D. They're exploring
hmm
how they're going to use AI in production, but no
yeah,
other studio has taken this step of actually being transparent about it. and so
Mm.
they deserve a lot of credit. Let's talk a little bit about how they said they're thinking of using AI, because I thought this part was really interesting as well. Um,
Yeah.
they said, they've been he's very, everything about the letter was, or about the guidelines, are very transparent. They said, we have an R&D team, and
Hmm.
we've been exploring it for the last year, which is what you would
Yeah.
do if you were running a company of that scale. You should be doing that. They said the studio expects to use AI in for predictive budgeting and scheduling, business service
Okay. Yeah.
chatbots. I mean,
Hmm.
that's everyone. That's not even a big thing. But here's where it gets interesting: animation cleanup and lip sync. So those are jobs that have
Mm.
traditionally are laborious, and there should be ways to automate them, but they are typically done by humans. And so they make
Hmm.
clear, though, that they want, even if they're doing lip sync and cleanup, facilitating that through AI to make the process faster, they still want it to assist their artists and not to replace the artists and
Mm.
storytellers. However,
Yeah.
even having said that, they also say that there's going to be some job displacement in the medium term. So it's, you can't have it both ways. Like
Yeah.
if lip sync and cleanup do go AI, there is going to be some job displacement, but new jobs are going to crop up too that are needed for uh,
Yeah.
these new
Well, here's
systems.
a big thing that they have is
So,
they have an internal AI council, right, in place to kind
hmm
of update their guidelines. So that's again a role created for this, that kind of thing. I don't know if it's just an artist that's on a board or something, or if it's an official role. I'm not sure, but again, it kind of shows the trend in that direction. And lip syncing, sure, is very laborious if you're using very specific mouth shapes, not very expressive ones. But like that's automated all the time now. Loads of people do that without even thinking about it. Character Animator and Adobe software is literally like the auto lip sync there. Loads of people do that. Nobody likes lip syncing, really, in terms of that. But yeah, the transparency is wonderful, really, really wonderful, and to be able to say we don't want to replace anyone, but there's going to be displacement. That is transparency. You know.
I was really impressed by doing
Mhm.
this. Let's you want to take a comment we got there? What's your take on
Yeah,
that
what have
one?
we got here? So no other studio would do it because they get sued for copyright infringement, especially somewhere as lawsuit heavy as the US. That's interesting. But then I did see a company credit Midjourney recently, like I said. So nobody knows how this works. Really, nobody knows. And it most of the time, it's usually the artists when they see their work um, recreated in AI. They're the ones that take exception to it, right? It's not going to be anyone else. So really it's up to artists to be very vigilant. And there's something recently on Instagram where Meta have said that they're going to be skimming all Instagram accounts to pull uh, that data for their learning systems for AI. And you can try and opt out of it, but you have to fill out a form and basically plead your case to them rather than just a yes no tick box. And loads of artists online aren't happy about it. I know Tony or Tom Bancroft has put out a piece of art which is like says no AI that's been shared around quite a lot as well. So I mean, we're dealing with companies here that are going to be, they all want to use AI. Everyone's using AI anyway. So it's really down to the artists to protect themselves here, because artists need publicity. So you're going to use the biggest sites to project yourself. But those sites are then using AI to train their models from your art. So it's this kind of big, big loop. Um, Another comment here, I feel like aspects that aren't directly character animation will be fully AI in the future. Lip sync, first simulation, crowd animation, etc. Yeah, crowd animation is a bit of a sad one, even though it's difficult. But someone like Miyazaki says they're people. They're not mindless faces in a crowd. They deserve just as much attention, and that's why his worlds feel real because he puts that attention in. Yeah, Facebook stinks. Also, that's EU only. Lovely, lovely. Um, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I've been going on there.
Well, let's move on to. Well, I can't say it's a happy topic, but it's another story that
Yeah.
that I got to point something out about this story. So this story we ran at, what day does it say? 6/5/19, right? So this was a week or so ago. But this Musker interview came out like in Spanish, top Spanish newspaper, and
Mm,
no one was really looking at it. And then I read it. I'm like, wow, he's saying a lot of things I've never heard him say before. And so I did this
yeah.
story, and then now a week later, literally every single person picked up the exact same headline. Like people didn't realize that he actually said this, and then everyone who's like New York Post and TMZ
Mm,
and Variety, they all ran almost the exact same headline that we ran. But it's like it pays to pay attention to foreign language media because
yeah.
they often
Or
say
my
things there.
podcast.
Yeah.
You know.
do
Sorry, go
you
on.
did you talk about this on your podcast?
No, but
Oh, okay.
they're always saying controversial stuff that people glaze over. You know. Anyway, sorry.
Well,
Go on.
go ahead and summarize like so. What's your take on this story? Yeah, John Musker saying Disney needs a course correction. This is a popular thing that a lot of people are saying in the U.S. too. A lot of people don't like Disney. They're like, stop doing this woke stuff, right? And and and
Yeah.
and I and I say that not that I agree with it. I'm just saying this is the take that you hear a lot on social media from people. But what's your take
I
on
just
what he's saying here?
sorry. There's a comment there. Cartoon Brew question mark. More like trend setting brew. So-
Yeah,
Thanks.
if I had a
That's for
list
me.
for every time we've like made a story, like it happens so often that no
Oh,
one's like
okay.
there'll be something like I'll run a story like a month later based on some random thing I see and no one's talked about it. It's just some random story, and I'll like weeks later I'll run a story and then suddenly it becomes a huge story after we run it, and it's just yeah it is kind of like you know
Doing the groundwork.
this is why I
Yeah.
always said like I think our tagline for a while we don't use it anymore, but it's like leading the conversation. But that's what it really means. It's like people look to you to find out like what are we going to talk about next, right?
Mm.
We never get any credit for that, but we're one of the sites that does that, right? We
Well,
do tell
you
people.
got one comment of credit there,
Yeah, I
so
appreciate it. Who
that's
who
that.
is that? Untitled Project. Well, yeah, thank you for recognizing that. I
Okay.
appreciate it. Let's see.
In
Let's
terms,
take this comment. Other one too.
yeah, good work for yeah.
After Musker left Disney, this is the comment. He was supposed to direct a DC Comics animated movie, but it got shelved. Is he still working or retired now? He's definitely not retired because he just made a film, and he's on the festival
Yeah,
circuit promoting the film,
he's
which
on
is
the
what you do if
festival.
you made a film. So I wouldn't call him retired at all. I, yeah, the Warner Brothers thing. I think there's with the management changes and James Gunn coming in.
Mm.
I think that they're going in a different direction, but I wouldn't call Musker retired. I think
Oh,
he's still gonna be doing stuff. I don't know what, and I don't know if he's gonna be in a studio setting, if it's gonna be as a short filmmaker, independent filmmaker. I don't know.
yeah, he's running the independent line at the moment,
Yeah.
which is that's a great thing for artists because he's delivered some incredible work to the world, and that it leads into the story, which is the idea, the core root of the story, which is story over message, right, or message over story, which seems to be the kind of this idea of wokeism, um, which is a very general term. But I'll read his quote, right? So we weren't trying to be woke, although I understand the criticism. The classic Disney films didn't start out trying to have a message. They wanted you to get involved with the characters and the story and the world. And I think that's still at the heart of it. You don't have to exclude agendas. You don't have to first create characters who you sympathize with and are compelling. I think they need to do a course correction a bit in terms of putting the message secondary behind entertainment and compelling story and engaging characters. So that's the quote there about the course correction. And you know what? He's so right because you see it happens a lot in the remakes. In Aladdin, they added this um, or amplified the story of Jasmine in the remake, and they gave her a new original song talking about breaking away her chains and everything like that. And Aladdin kind of became this almost a secondary character in the remake to her own story. Even though it's called Aladdin, whereas in the original, Jasmine is still very interesting. She's very intelligent and she knows what's going on. She's not being led by anyone. But in the second one, it seems to be that like the message started to be pushed ahead, and story decisions are changed based on that. And my understanding of this is that's basically what's happening. And Musker kind of in his outline, he attributes that to the number of creative voices that you kind of have to listen to, right? How many cooks are in the kitchen? Um, he said under Katzenberg, he was the emperor. There weren't 10 different Jeffreys you had to answer to. And now there are a lot of people to satisfy. But in some ways, he's talking about Moana here, they were right and that was a good thing. And you said here in the article, that is a good thing because Moana is still going strong. And you can see that even in the release of Moana 2, the trailer. People love Moana. But that's not always the case. Sometimes all those voices do kind of tend to start to cut away at the core of what you are talking about, right? And start to push the message. And it seems to kind of pander to the black and whiteness that the world is kind of settling in at the moment. It tends to be that way. There's not a lot of space for gray areas, and they, to me, always make the most interesting characters, ones that sit a bit gray but realize what they're doing isn't the best thing and come back toward the light. um Anyways, I'm going off on my own train here. Sorry.
Well, I mean,
I'm
I mean,
off.
let's look at what Musker said. I mean, what he's saying is
Yeah.
they wanted you to get involved in the characters in the story in the world, the old Disney films, and so that's a
Yeah.
pretty harsh condemnation of the current studio. He's basically saying they don't want to
Mm.
get you involved in the character and the stories in the world, and I think
Hmm.
a lot of people have trouble articulating. People say, "Oh, it's all agenda driven." What does that mean? I think
Yeah.
here, I mean, here's my take on it, right? I usually sometimes give takes by offering an example, and I think
Hmm.
they're not writing characters anymore, and sometimes they're
Mm.
putting agendas ahead of characters. One of the things that really stuck out to me was an example of this. This is the example I'm offering is in Strange World,
Hmm.
where you had
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
I forget all the names of the characters. I have no idea who they were, but there's the grandfather character, the explorer character,
Yeah.
and then you have the
Yeah.
little kid character. He's not a kid; he's a teenager, right? But he goes
Hmm.
up to his grandfather, and there's a scene in there where they're first getting to reconnect because he's never met his grandfather. His grandfather's been missing for years, and he goes up to this grizzled guy who's been living out in this strange world for a long time, and he says,
Mm.
grandfather, and he says, I'm gay, right? Or, I like this.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
he doesn't literally say I'm gay. He says, like, I like this boy. And so
Hmm.
the character, if you understand a grizzled old guy who's been living there, doesn't know anything about the world today, he would maybe pause for a second. He would perform something that would say like a question, oh really, or something, or how did you meet him, or what is going. I mean,
Hmm.
the writing would say something about the character, reveal something. Instead, he says, "That's amazing," and then he starts giving him advice on how to propose or how to talk to another boy. Like, this is not the character that they've established for the first half hour of
Mm.
the film, that he's some liberal guy that understands, same-sex relationships, and yet somehow he has a lot of advice to give. He doesn't even question it. Like, and that to me is kind of lazy storytelling because they were no longer
Mm.
writing the character at that moment. Something was
Yeah. I know what you mean.
something was
Yeah.
off about how the character reacted because they were putting the agenda of I don't think it was
Mm.
even an agenda. They were just trying to get through the scene, right? But they forgot who the characters were. And that to me
Yeah.
happens. It happens a lot in the Disney films where this is what Musker is saying is they wanted you to get involved in the characters. Well, if the characters you can't believe them because they're not behaving as they have throughout. If they don't behave in a consistent manner, you don't
Mm,
have believable characters anymore. That
yeah,
that to me is
and
the
I
example
think
of what I give.
that shows a kind of a broader trend in terms of storytelling that I've noticed in the Disney umbrella, right? So you're talking about Marvel, or you can talk. We're drifting a bit from animation here, but even Star Wars things. There's like the connective tissues between story beats always feel very jerky. It doesn't quite land where you're expecting it to land because it
Mm-hmm.
loses the consistency to get to the next um, uh, story beat. They're just like, okay, so they're kind of like it's a focus on moments more than story, I think. And like you're saying, the agenda there, it releases. Yeah, I don't. It's something that's bothered me for a while because it pulls you out, right? It does pull you
Yeah,
out, something like that. And there's nothing wrong with how he reacted, but he just wasn't set up that way. He just absolutely wasn't set up that way at all. And how, Ethan, I think, is the name of the young boy, and Jaeger is the grandfather, basically. I remember Strange World, but it's like this big, grizzled old grandfather who is just so ready to get out of that space and has been missing for years. And then suddenly, you're just like, oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, that's nice, I guess. Rather than being like, oh, that's so lovely.
yeah.
Um,
And
and I
again, it's
think that's,
I don't
yeah,
even think it's an agenda. I think it's just they let they know, like, oh well, we need to be understand this is where the scene needs to end, right? It needs to be a
yeah,
positive portrayal. But
mhm,
getting there, they were lazy in doing so, and they stopped writing the character, and they just wrote where they needed to go, right? And
yeah,
that kind
yeah,
of laziness in storytelling is very very common in animated features, unfortunately. But
yeah,
when you add it with it's going to a place where it's like it's giving some kind of a message. That's where it starts kind of going, like people start noticing that, and you have to
yeah,
be really bad at it when people start actually noticing like how they're actually calling it out. They don't exactly know what they're calling out, but the fact that
mm,
people know something's going on just tells you like they've really kind of dropped the ball on writing. The artwork is still great.
yeah, yeah. And you're so right, because the best relationships, they give them the time to build, right? They allow the connective stuff to happen, and the stories make sense. Like the Iron Giant, Lilo and
It
Stitch, How to Train
simmers.
Your Dragon.
They have to
You know,
simmer.
they have to simmer, and they need scenes where it seems like not much is happening, but so much is happening, right? Because they're
Mm-hmm.
bonding and they're building, and those relationships mean so much more to people then. And you don't question it at all. You're hurt when they're hurt, and you're happy when they're happy. um oh, here's a comment. Ever since Lasseter left, Disney and Pixar made a dynamic shift. What do you make of that one, Amid?
I'm not always the biggest fan of Lasseter's
mm,
stories, but when it
mm,
comes to storytelling, he's much more rigorous than what they got right now. Right? He
yeah,
was quite good, and he understood what the actual purpose of the film was, which is to create a cohesive film that makes money, right? Like I don't even think
yeah,
that I don't know who they're making these films for, but like Lasseter understood, like I'm delivering entertainment in a package, and it's got to be a solid story that makes sense, right? Like the
yeah.
characters got to make sense, and so I
It's the
give him a lot
same
of
as
credit for
Disney.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, he was running
Same
Disney.
as
I mean,
Walt Disney.
he was. Oh, you mean like Walt? Exactly.
Walt himself. Yeah.
He had a good common man's kind of touch, and again, it gets old. I mean, by the time he left, I wouldn't say he was at his peak at that moment,
Mm,
but certainly he was constructing the films in a way that even if they kind of sanded off some of the originality and the edges of other directors, the final product was still stronger than the current product. Having said that, Encanto is a really good film. I mean, that's
Encanto is amazing. Yeah, that's
I
their
like that
best.
one a lot.
And I think it's amazing because it knows the core of what it's trying to do, which is tell a theatrical story. like an actual theater. This is something that could be on stage, and they never strayed from that. Like, it was so theatrical and well done, and really tight, like small and tight. It's all in one house. They knew what they were doing. Um, Another question: will you guys be over at Annecy this year? Resounding yes.
Yeah, we'll be there.
We'll be there and square. You know. What are you looking forward to in Annecy? I mean, I don't know if you're finished with this story, but
Yeah,
we
I
can
think we're done with this. Yeah, we
close out
can
on
move on.
something
We can move
positive.
on to Annecy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean Annecy's coming up next week. There's so many things going on, and I think the biggest regret with Annecy is always like what you don't see that you wanted to see. Like I have a ton of different programs that I want to attend, and yet
Mm,
I'll probably attend one or two because I'll have
yeah.
meetings at all the times that are, during these programs. But you have probably a more free schedule than I do. You don't have a free schedule.
Absolutely don't. Because I'm saying, because you're starting to assign me interviews, and that means that the things that I want to see are going to start clashing with these, which is fine. We've got some really, really. I'm really excited actually for some of those interviews. Um, they're big. They're big and cool, and I think people are really going to enjoy them.
Can we talk about
What
them?
I'm Well, that's up to you. You're the editor. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. But
Go ahead. I
I
mean,
will say one
I
thing.
actually don't know what you're doing exactly. So maybe.
Oh, okay. Well, we're going to talk. Well, you know what I will say? What I'm really looking forward to seeing in Annecy the most this year is The Glassworker. They're finally releasing it. It's having
Mm.
its premiere at Annecy,
Tell
and I've
people what
talked to
that
Usman
is
Riaz.
because.
Yeah, it's Pakistan's first hand drawn animated feature, and it's made by a studio set up specifically to make this movie called Mano Studios, led by Usman Riaz, who is a TED fellow and who learned to animate by hand just so he could tell the story. He's always loved animation, which is a wonderful story in itself. But then you think about the context of where they did this, which is Pakistan, which, obviously has a great tradition in cinema, has no real deep tradition in terms of animation. And when they were hiring people to make the film, like, it's very hard to find artists there. Art is not really seen as a um, uh, successful career. So when they were advertising for jobs for animators, people would apply who were doctors and were
Wow.
dentists, and they wanted to leave their job because they did that because that was their choice. That's what their family wanted them to do. But really, they're artists at heart. But they went and studied, medicine. And when they then not only had to convince the person that it was a good idea, but they also had to then convince the parents of the people joining that actually this is a career for them. So you can imagine, like, the hurdles to get through this alone, with a team who have never made animation before, led by someone who's never animated, and they had to learn everything from scratch. And it looks stunning. It really does look beautiful. They wear their influences on their sleeve. Like, this is very anime inspired, very Ghibli inspired, and they've no qualms admitting that, that because that's what you do. You learn from what you copy, like AI. And I've been really looking forward to see it. We did an interview with them 2 years ago at Annecy, where they laid out all that, the core creative team and the producers as well. And finally, it's coming out. I'm really looking forward to it, just to see what this team of people who, started at the bottom to learn all these skills are putting out there. And they had they were at Cannes as well. They were at Cannes. They were invited to represent Pakistan at Cannes. So that I'm really looking forward to that. The premiere is on Monday at 4:30 in they're in competition there, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing.
Nice. I looked through the just to see how many programs they have, how many separate programs they have. Hang on, I'm looking for that because I wanted to also mention this before I forget. But anyway, I was looking through the number of programs that are on the
Yeah.
calendar. Something like over 620 programs, individual programs. I mean, that's
Honestly.
That's insane.
How can you do?
Like you
How can you
can,
do
you
this?
you can't
Yeah,
you can't even do like you can do 20 of them maybe, right?
yeah,
But it just really is gotten it's become Comic Con now. I don't You're not probably as familiar with Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con, as people
yeah,
in Southern California are, but that was it grew into something that became a bit of a monster, right? Like there were so many
mm,
programs going on covering all sorts of things. Now what's funny is, at least for the animation industry, I would argue that Annecy has replaced San Diego Comic Con. So Comic Con used to be the place, about until 10 years ago, until 7 years ago, where all the
mm,
film studios would launch their trailers and their debuts for the coming year. They would wait till July in San Diego, and they would, run them there. For the animation industry, all those big previews that used to happen at Comic Con, they've now shifted over to France, to the
yeah,
Annecy Festival. And doesn't
mm,
mean they're still not showing them at Comic Con, but they're no longer debuting there, right? They've moved it
yes,
to
yeah,
Annecy. Now, why is that? I think a big reason for that is the audience, right? There's a
yes,
lot
yeah,
of people who are passionate about animation at Annecy, but the deciding factor here is that they're also 90% of them are animation students. So they
yeah,
understand more about what they're seeing. They're going to be respectful because they want to get into the industry as well, right? This is where they want to be. So they're very
yeah,
attuned to these premieres. They get great receptions there. At Comic Con, 90% of the people there are fans, and
yeah,
nothing wrong with showing your work to fans, but you're not going to get the same reaction. You're not going to get the same
mm,
positive buzz. You're not going to get people kind of you're going to get a lot harsher reactions from people who aren't actually doing the work than you are from if you're showing it to colleagues and professionals and students who are
mm,
trying to become professionals. So Annecy is just this kind of really it's low key compared to Comic Con. It's still like 1/10 the size, but even as big as it's gotten, it's still tiny. But it's also a very positive place to debut work, and so I would argue that Annecy's kind of become far more important than Comic Con in terms of animation for the coming year.
yeah. And you know what else is they're showcasing? There's so many work in progresses and talks and things, which is amazing, and master classes.
Mm-hmm.
Terry Gilliam is going to be there. Wes Anderson is there this
That's
year. There's
amazing.
some
Yeah.
that's huge, and they're
Chris Sanders is
revealing
going to be
things.
there for
Chris
Wild
Sanders as well,
Robot.
yeah. Wild Robot, yeah.
Yeah,
We're gonna have a, a
that's gonna
nice time.
that's gonna be a
But things
that's gonna be
like
a big film.
I think it is. I mean, Chris Sanders, what a yeah, great storyteller. I will say, great storyteller. But things like Arcane, they're showcasing the next season of Arcane there. That's huge. Um, People will be clamoring to get into that because that was a big shifter in the industry. Nobody expected that, and it's shifted the whole 3D space, anyways. So there's so much big things there, but there's also so much like artistry as well, and student work and independent work. It's really just an amazing celebration of like there's stuff there for everyone. You could just go see all the big things, you can go see all the little things, or you can see a big mix, and that's so nice. And everyone's there. The people who are showcasing it, they're there as well, and they're just walking around the streets. You can just talk to them.
We got a question. You want to take this? Is Annecy primarily independent studios? What do you say, Cole?
Absolutely not. No, no.
It's everyone. It's
Uh,
it's all the
it's
majors are
everyone.
there. Yeah.
And they always have big parties. Like Netflix rented the castle last year to launch Nimona. That's how
That's not
it's
gonna
not
make
just
any sense
independent.
saying if you've never been to Annecy, yes, there is a castle there, right? So,
Yeah, there's a castle on the hill, and they rented the whole castle for their launch party of Nimona, basically. Um, and the year before they'd rented a boat. So there's the studios like in Disney always have like a barbecue on the Friday and stuff like that. So the studios put a lot of time and money into this, to pull people into their spheres of influence, basically.
they got one thing I'm looking forward to is
Mm.
Adult Swim and Warner Brothers. They're going to be talking more about their efforts in the adult animation space, and they're going to screen the entire first episode of this new show they got called Common Side Effects. This is going to be on Adult Swim. The show is
Mm.
created by Joe Bennett, who was one of the creators of Scavenger's Reign, and Steve
Yes. Oh,
Healy. Yeah,
what a
and
great
Steve
show. Yeah.
Healy, I'm not too familiar with him, but I know he's worked on American Dad and The Office and Veep. But it's a show by them, but it's being produced by Mike Judge's new company, Bandera Entertainment, and
Mm.
Mike has been very involved in the show as well. And Joe Bennett, his Scavenger's Reign doesn't necessarily show that, but his other work shows a very strong kind of Mike Judge influence.
Mm.
And so Mike's
Mm.
been working with him on this show, and basically anything Mike Judge is involved in, I'm in, because I think he's probably the smartest writer, kind of creator in the animation industry today. I love his work. And so this,
Yeah.
but add it with Joe Bennett, who's Scavenger's Reign. And I don't know who Steve Healy is, but I'm sure he's good too. It should be a very interesting. And
Wow.
they're showing the first episode of this Adult Swim series called Common Side Effects. So I'm looking forward to that.
Wow.
They're all going to be there too to talk about it.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, and that's what the best thing about Annecy is. You have something like that you've got so much to look forward to, really and truly. I absolutely love that. There's so much I'm really looking forward to as well. I went through the program a couple of days ago and started putting my little hearts on what I want to see. And once they release the tickets, it's gonna be it's gonna be
When did they
hard.
do that? I don't even know when they
I don't
release
know. Well,
tickets.
listen,
They might
yeah,
have already done
you'll
it.
get your press pass. Don't worry. But yeah, I'm really really looking forward to it. And last year, uh, Gendy Tartakovsky had a great panel on his feature Fixed. So there's always just I find them so honest as well, especially people like Mike Judge or someone to sit up and showcase their work. You're really getting a true look at what they're doing, not just some kind of behind the scenes fake documentary, release. You're actually there hearing their voice as they're presenting throughout, and hopefully maybe there's questions and answers. Who knows? But they're going to be around, which means they'll be around for the festival. And if you see them on the street, you can just walk up and say, "Hey." Don't pitch them anything though. Just talk to them.
Oh,
I
I've
remember
I've
Guillermo
seen.
del Toro was there one year, and he was just like, "Anyone, please talk to me about animation. I love it. Just don't pitch me anything. But apart from that, I'm happy to talk to you.
No, I've
Anyone's,
also seen uncomfortable situations where, so Annecy, there's the beautiful old town where you can sit
Mm,
cafes outside and eat, and I've sometimes seen like people go up to a well-known person who's like eating and disturbing them and saying, "Can you
yeah.
draw something for me?" or "Can you do this?" And just
Oh, don't do
don't do
that.
that.
Yeah,
Don't do that.
don't do that. Wait till they're finished eating, at least.
It's a great place to catch up
But
with
yeah.
people, though. I love going, and I haven't been
Mm,
since 2019, since the pandemic. So I'm looking forward to kind of heading back there, seeing what's new.
yeah.
Hey, so I think that's it for this week. This was pretty fun. A lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, so much fun talking about layoffs and AI. Um, but guys,
Uh,
thank you so much for joining us. I love the comments and the interaction. Oh, a quick question there actually popped in. D23. Do you ever go to that, Amid?
I've
Is
never
that
been. I know I've always
yeah?
wanted to go, but I wasn't living in California until last year.
Hmm. Do you think you'll go this year then?
If I can get a ticket, I might drop by. I've never been.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't even know how you get a ticket to it. So
yeah. I think that'd be interesting. Anyways, it was
yeah,
just one of the comments there, one of the questions.
I'm not.
But sorry,
There's a
thank you
lot of
so much.
Disney fans there. I'm not sure.
Not your
I
vibe.
mean, it's
Just go with the flow.
it's a mood. To be in that Disney vibe. You really got to kind of lean into it, and it takes
Yeah.
me sometimes. Like I love Disney stuff, right?
Mm.
But to be like
Yeah, of course.
surrounded by like that many people like Disney, I'm gonna like like
Do you not go to Disneyland then, or Disney World?
I
Or
rarely ever go.
yeah, well, that makes sense.
But yeah, but
Anyways,
I
thank you
will
on
go
that
if I can get a
curmudgeonly.
ticket. Yeah.
Yeah, so if anyone's watching that wants to give him a ticket, there you go. But on that curmudgeonly note, thank you so much, guys, for joining us. And thank you for your time. I'm not sure if we're going to have it next week. I hope we do. But I'll actually be in Annecy this time next week already.
Really, you're going to be there on
So
Friday, next Friday?
I'll be landing on Friday, yeah.
Okay.
So just to settle myself and get ready for the long week ahead, you know. Um, but yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do it next week. I'll be in Annecy.
I'll still be
If
in
not,
LA. So,
okay.
but,
Oh, there's only one more hour in the difference, so yeah. But thank you so much, Amid. I hope you have a good weekend.
same to you, Cole.
Yeah,
Yep. We'll talk soon.
thank you. Thanks, everyone.